You wake up feeling like you've already run a marathon in your dreams. Your eyes open, your feet touch the floor, but something in you lags behind. The air feels heavier than usual. It's not just a lack of sleep or a rough morning. It's something deeper, harder to name. There's a weight that doesn't lift with coffee or fresh air, a hollowness that clings to your bones. You go about your routine, dress up for the day, check your phone, and the world instantly rushes in. Emails, messages, reminders, all screaming urgency cloaked in enthusiasm. Every buzz feels like a demand you didn't agree to. And yet, you keep moving. Because that's what we do. But pause for a moment. What if the problem isn't just tiredness? What if what you're feeling is a symptom, not a mood? What if you are not simply worn out, but unwell in a way that society refuses to recognize? It's a quiet kind of sickness, hidden beneath the surface of productivity and smiles. It doesn't show on the outside, not immediately, but it gnaws at your sense of self. And the worst part is, we've normalized it. We live in a time where the prison has no walls, and the whip has no hand. The orders no longer come from above. They echo from within. You push yourself harder, not because someone told you to, but because you've learned to believe you must. You must hustle, must grind, must evolve, improve, outperform. The chains are invisible, yet they pull tighter every day. You've internalized the demand. It's now your voice, whispering that rest is laziness, that stillness is failure. What used to be imposed is now embraced. And that's the trick. That's the cruelty. You think you're in control. You think you're choosing this. But you're not. You've been sold a dream dressed as freedom. The idea that you can do anything, achieve everything, if only you try hard enough. And when you fall short, when you break, when you collapse, it's your fault, right? Because you were free to succeed. So failure must be yours to carry alone. This is the world we inhabit now. A society obsessed with output, with optimization. Even our rest must serve a purpose. You don't just sleep. You track your sleep quality. You don't read for pleasure. You read to gain insights, strategies, an edge. Leisure has become another form of labor. Even meditation is a tool for performance, not peace. Everything is a task. Every breath must count. And when you don't keep up, when your body starts to slow, when your mind starts to drift, you feel the sting of shame. A deep, nagging guilt, not because someone scolded you, but because you scold yourself. You question your worth. You measure your value in metrics, in hours, in accomplishments. And that's not living. That's surviving a system designed to keep you running until there's nothing left of you but a shell. So what do you do when the prison is in your own mind? When the punishment is your own self-judgment? You can't strike or rebel against yourself. Or can you? Because here's a radical idea. What if resistance doesn't look like struggle? What if the act of reclaiming your humanity begins with something as simple and as powerful as stopping? Not pausing to recharge, not resting so you can work better tomorrow, but stopping for real, refusing to play the game, saying no, not out of defiance but out of self-respect. But this is hard, because we've been taught to fear stillness, to run from silence. The moment there's a pause, we reach for distraction, a screen, a plan, a goal, anything but the empty space that forces us to face ourselves. Because in that space, all the buried questions start to surface. Who am I, really? What do I want? Not what should I want, not what do they expect, but what do I truly, deeply desire? We don't ask those questions anymore. We don't have time, or rather, We've convinced ourselves we don't. So we fill every second with noise, tasks, content, productivity. Until one day, we look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Because we've become fragments, functions, roles, personas. And the soul, the quiet, sacred core of who we are, has been drowned out. But here's the truth. You can still find your way back. Not by doing more, but by doing less. By daring to be still, to be unproductive, to sit in silence long enough to hear your own voice again. The voice beneath the noise. The one that doesn't care about your resume or your follower count. The one that only wants you to live. Fully. Gently. Honestly. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're just tired of pretending. Tired of performing. Tired of striving to meet a standard that was never human to begin with. And that tiredness is not a flaw. It's a signal. A call to return to yourself. In that return, you'll rediscover what you've forgotten. That doing nothing is not wasteful. That silence is not empty. That you don't have to prove anything to deserve rest, peace, or joy. You don't need permission to be. You already are, and that is enough. So maybe, just maybe, freedom isn't found in the ability to do everything. Maybe it's in the courage to do nothing, to sit quietly with your thoughts, to reclaim your day, to step off the treadmill and breathe deeply for no reason other than that you can. And in that breath, in that stillness, you begin to heal. Not with grand gestures or 10-step plans, but with presence, with truth, with the radical rebellious act of slowing down in a world that never stops. That's where it starts. That's where you start. Not as a task, not as a project, but as a person, a soul, a heart that beats not to perform, but simply to live. And once you begin to feel that quiet shift, when the noise starts to settle and the rush fades into the background, you notice something unexpected. A small space opens up within you. Not a void, but a presence. Something ancient and familiar. It's the part of you that was never broken, never rushed, never demanded to be more. It's the part that simply is. It doesn't care about goals. It doesn't want applause. It just wants to breathe. And as you stand there, inside that stillness, you begin to see the world differently. You notice how others are rushing too, their eyes heavy with the same invisible weight. They smile, they nod, they post about their wins, but underneath it all, there's a quiet fatigue, a silent question. Am I enough? Am I doing enough? You see them now, not as competitors or comparisons, but as mirrors, each of them fighting the same silent war. And you realize we've all been tricked into competing in a race with no finish line, a race no one ever really wins, because the prize isn't peace, it's more speed, more work, more striving, and less of ourselves. So you begin to withdraw, not in defeat, but in wisdom. You start to protect your energy. You start to say no more often. Not because you're angry, but because you're choosing you. You start waking up without reaching for your phone. You walk slower. You sit longer. You listen deeper. You no longer fear missing out, because you're no longer missing yourself. And it's not easy. There are moments of doubt. Days when you want to jump back into the rush, to feel productive again, to measure your worth in outcomes and outputs. But then something stops you. A memory, a whisper, that quiet space inside that now feels like home. You start to understand that life isn't about winning or optimizing or even improving. It's about being awake enough to feel it, the texture of each moment, the scent of rain, The ache in your chest when something moves you. The warmth in your hands when you pause to breathe. These aren't distractions from life. They are life. You begin to reclaim things that were stolen by urgency. Long, aimless walks, conversations without agendas, music with no purpose but to stir your soul. You rediscover your own rhythms, the ones that don't sync with deadlines or targets. And slowly, gently, you return to yourself. The voice inside you grows stronger. The one that says, you don't need to earn rest. You don't need to chase value. You are enough now. That voice becomes your anchor, your compass. And even on hard days, when the old noise returns and whispers that you're falling behind, you now know how to answer. You breathe, you pause, and you remember. You were never meant to be a machine. You were never supposed to live in output mode. You were built for presence, not performance, for wonder, not work, for being, not branding. And when you begin to live like that, even just a little, others notice. Not because you're louder or more impressive, but because you carry a stillness that is rare. A kind of peace that speaks louder than noise. People begin to ask you what changed, and all you can say is, I stopped trying to be more. And I started allowing myself to just be. This journey isn't linear. It's not a transformation you check off a list. It's a practice, a remembering, a returning, again and again, to yourself, to now, to this. Because at the heart of all this exhaustion is a truth we've forgotten, that we are human. And being human was never meant to be efficient. It was meant to be felt. So stay with that feeling. Don't rush past it. Let it hold you. Let it soften you. Let it remind you that even in a world demanding your best performance, your deepest worth lies not in what you do, but in who you are when you stop doing. And in that sacred stillness, you don't just survive, you begin to truly live. And as this stillness begins to feel less foreign and more like home, you start to unlearn the lies you've carried for so long, that your worth is measured in hours, that rest is something to earn, that joy must be productive. You begin to see how these beliefs were never yours. They were placed there, gently, persistently, by a system that thrives on your exhaustion. A culture that sells busyness as virtue and burnout as proof of ambition. But now, you're waking up. Not the kind of waking that rushes to the next task, but the kind where your eyes adjust to a different kind of light. The kind that lets you see clearly for the first time. That shows you how sacred slowness is, how rare it is to be present, how radical it is to live fully in a world that tells you to keep running. You start to find beauty in pauses, in unfinished thoughts, in days that don't follow a plan, in conversations that meander, in silence that holds more than words ever could. You rediscover the art of simply noticing, the texture of sunlight on your skin, the sound of your own breath, the way time moves differently when you stop chasing it, and something inside you starts to mend, not because you fixed yourself, but because you finally stopped trying to. You gave yourself permission to exist outside the metrics, beyond the comparisons, and in doing so, you met a version of yourself that had been waiting all along, a version that doesn't need to be better, doesn't need to impress, doesn't need to prove anything, just needs to be seen, heard, felt by you. This kind of living, this gentle, grounded presence, it doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, but it changes everything. Because now, even in the middle of a chaotic world, you carry a quiet inside you, a kind of knowing that you don't have to keep up, that you are allowed to rest, that you are allowed to feel, that you are allowed to say, "This is enough." And maybe the most powerful thing of all, you no longer feel alone. Because now you understand this fatigue, this emptiness, this search for something real, it's not just yours, it's ours. It's the silent language of a generation that was promised everything and still feels lost. And in recognizing that, in naming it, in facing it, you've already begun to heal. So let this be your truth now. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lazy or weak or lost. You are human. And that is a miracle in itself. Not because of what you produce, but because of what you feel, what you hold, what you survive. You don't need to earn your breath. You don't need to justify your presence. You don't need to hustle to be worthy of love, peace, or belonging. You already are, right here, as you are, even when you're tired, especially when you're tired. So if you need to stop, stop. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to lie down and let the world spin without you for a while, do it. You're not missing life. You're finally letting it in. Because the truth is, the most important parts of you were never meant to be optimized. They were meant to be cherished, protected, loved. And now, finally, you're learning how to do that. Not someday, not when you've done enough, but now. And that, quietly, gently, is everything.